Hi everybody, this is Maya Good, and this is a talk about my experience of reading Where I'm Calling From by Raymond Carver. First off, my notes are not going to be as extensive as they were supposed to be because when I was culling my bookshelves, I accidentally culled that book, even though I told myself, make sure you set that book aside because you still haven't made the video and written your review. So yeah, that happened. First, I want to say that this was a huge experiment for me. Up until this year, I was never a huge short story reader. I began reading short stories with the Literary Roadhouse podcast, and through that, I've developed a much deeper love of short story. Like, I really love reading them, but I realized I'd never read a collection by one author. And I had just read one story here, one story there, but I'd never gone through and systematically read a collection. And I had an old copy of Where I'm Calling From by Raymond Carver sitting on my bookshelf. I'd gotten it in '98 when I was taking a class at community college. And I'd only read one story in it. We were supposed to read 3, and I managed to just fake my way through the class. My twins were less than a year old when I was taking that class, and I was tired. So all the reading did not happen that year. So I opened it up and I began reading this book. And I just want to say that this was a very interesting experience for me. When I started reading the book, I did not like Carver's writing. I had this experience of I would read a story, it would be interesting, I would want to understand it, and I couldn't understand it. And I would think, well, maybe it was about this or maybe it was about that, but I never felt sure, and it left me very uneasy as a reader. After about, I would say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, after about 5 short stories, I began to enjoy him much more. And the first time I got that feeling was when I read What Do You Do in San Francisco? That particular story, there was something about it that caught my breath and made me think, oh, there's something more here. I think I understand why this is such an important writer. Whereas up until that story, I kind of felt like this was a story that had been redacted. Like someone had taken a short story and just blacked out a whole bunch of it, and that's what I was reading. And I was struggling to fill in what had been underneath the Sharpie marks. Like that's kind of how I felt reading the first couple of short stories. As I understood how to read him more, and I was able to feel more secure in my own interpretations of what I was reading, I found myself enjoying him quite a bit. Now, these stories there are stories in here from his very first collection, and there are stories in this collection from after he died. All of Elephant is in this book. I think it's Elephant is like an extra 1, 2, 3, it's 7 stories that were found and published after his death. His writing changes a great deal during the course of this book. Now, some of that is because he got sober during some of this book. Some of it is because of his relationship with his editor. There was a lot of controversy that Mr. Lish had edited his work to such a point that you really couldn't tell who the actual author was in some of his early works. It was so bad that Raymond Carver actually wrote Lish and said, don't publish this collection. It's been edited so much, it's not me. There's also been rumors that maybe his wife at the time wrote some of them because he was too drunk to write. Whatever. I personally can chalk it up to personal growth. Like when I read the later stories, I still hear the Raymond Carver that was in the early stories, but I hear him grown up. His early stories have so much depth and are really important, and they have tons of questions and no answers. His later stories, I start to hear like the wisdom of the old man that's starting to find some answers. And in Cathedral, it was the first time that I felt like the protagonist had an epiphany or grew in some way. And the stories after that all seem to have much more of a growth arc than the earlier stories, which were often just people doing something and you're watching them, and at the end they haven't learned anything, and there's layers of meaning there, but there's no resolution, there's no real growth. Um, you know, on the podcast, we had Roz Morris. Pardon me, I'm having problems with my eye. Roz Morris came on our podcast maybe 6 months ago. And we asked her, what's the definition of short story? Because we were debating it. We'd been reading some experimental fiction, and we were starting to run into short stories that felt like novels and short stories that felt like poems. And it was like, well, what is a short story? What is a story, period? And she said her theory was that a short story has growth of some sort. It can be growth of the character or growth of the reader. And Raymond Carver's early stories, I felt like they were much more heavy on growth of the reader. I felt like I was growing and like I had to do a lot of emotional work as I was reading the stories, but the characters didn't really grow. And his later stories, I felt like the characters often did learn things, and there was still a lot of ambiguity there, and I was still growing, but I was much more secure as a reader. And part of that also may just be because I finally learned how to read him. As I read more of his work, the more I enjoyed his work, to the point where towards the end of the collection, by the time I finally read Errand, I was really, really sad. Not just because Chekhov was dead, but also because the collection was over. I was so sad that the collection was over. I immediately went out and purchased 2 more collections on Kindle because I didn't want to end my relationship with Raymond Carver then. These are definitely short stories I'm going to come back to time and time again. It was a long process of reading all of them. Like I said, there are 37 short stories in this collection. It includes some of his best work from his best collections. I would say if you're looking for a place to start with Raymond Carver, Where I'm Calling From is a really good place. And this isn't something that you're going to sit down and read all his short stories in a couple days. Even if you could, I don't suggest it. I feel like when I first started, I was reading a short story a day for a couple weeks, and then I read a short story here and a short story there over a course of several months. And I actually feel like I got more out of reading him that way than I would have when I first started the first day and I tried to read multiples in one day and it just wasn't happening, and I stopped and I reread those stories and spaced them apart. These are stories that I really feel like you need time to digest them. You need time to muss on them a little bit, think about them, feel the emotions, feel the sadness or the happiness or whatever that particular story is making you feel, and then start the next story with a clean slate. That definitely gave me a lot by doing it that way. So I would say some of my favorite stories in this collection, I'm just reading off the list. Like What's in Alaska was really good. I liked What Do You Do in San Francisco. A lot of these you can also get online. Those ones definitely stuck in my head. Some of these I read so long ago, it's hard to remember which ones were really, really important to me. Obviously, Cathedral. I liked Cathedral. A Good Small Thing was heartbreaking. That is the story about the parents with the dead child who had purchased a birthday cake the morning that he died. That was a heart-wrenching story. Blackberry Pie, again, there are just so many good stories in here. Whoever was using this bed, oh, whoa. Yeah, that was deep. That was intense. I love that one. I can't really give I can't really give summaries of these stories now because my notes are gone, which kind of sucks. But there were so many places where I was reading and I would just get this aha moment. And those are some of the stories that I've listed, though, but as I got along in the collection, there were more and more of those moments is what I'm trying to say. And part of it, like I said, is because I learned how to read him. But as he grew as a writer, I think there are people that prefer early Raymond Carver and people that prefer late Raymond Carver. And I think I'm a late Raymond Carver person. And I think because his collection has so many stories at so many different points in his career, it's a really good place to start. So would I recommend this book? Absolutely. Would I give it 5 stars? I would give it 4. just because I don't give anything 5 stars, you know. And there were several stories that I just didn't care for. But 4.5 stars, like get it as close to 5 as possible. I'm all for it. Will I read it again? Absolutely. I purchased my second copy for my Kindle already, and I really look forward to going back and rereading some of these stories and understanding them more fully. There are so many things about these stories, moments of sadness, moments of happiness, moments of where you feel so close to the people in the stories. And it's really, really, really a beautiful thing. I only hope that someday I can capture half of that in my own writing. You know, and what reading Raymond Carver taught me also was to trust my initial instincts on what something means, instead of reading something and then asking myself what it means and then trying to find out if it was the right answer, because my gut was usually right. Like, a lot of these stories, I would read them, and then after I would read them, I would come up with what I thought they meant, and I would think about them, and then I would go and read actual analysis of them. And what I found was my own feelings were often right on point with what, quote unquote, academics were thinking. And I realized that I need to trust my own gut when I'm reading. Reading is my own relationship with the author. And if I'm reading analysis, that's for fun and for other ideas and input, but it shouldn't be because I don't trust my own instincts on what I'm reading. And that's something that Raymond Carver taught me. So I must end this review with saying I loved it. I highly recommend it. And if you're thinking about a place to start with Raymond Carver, I couldn't think of a better place.